Welcome to week 5 of our salmon series. We are going to be talking about stormwater runoff and pollution today. We're going to be watching a demonstration of an enviroscape, which is a model of a watershed, and we're going to talk about different pollutants that could happen inside of our watershed. And we're also going to explore a lot about stormwater. I actually have a jar of stormwater so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So stormwater runoff is the water that flows on the street and into our storm drains, so it picks up everything along the way that's on the pavement. And we're going to be exploring just some of the things that it could pick up and some of the ways that we can help kind of mitigate and lessen some of the impacts of all the contaminants that stormwater runoff can pick up. We're also going to be doing an experiment at the end where we're going to let some stormwater evaporate and see what the contents are. And again, a big special thanks to NOAA Fisheries and the BWET grant for supporting us through this virtual education of our salmon lessons. Okay, so today we are going to be learning all about pollution. This is an enviroscape, which is a model of a watershed. We learned 2 weeks ago what a watershed was. And so this is going to be a model. So today we're going to pretend that this is wherever you live. So for me right now, I'm going to pretend that this is a model of Ellensburg. And in our watershed model, we have a neighborhood with houses. Some of those houses are being built. We have a golf course. We have mountains and forests. We have a factory. We have roads and bridges. We have rivers. We have a farm with cows and a field where they grow crops. We have a body of water, so this is going to be like the Yakima River with a fish inside of it. We have cars on our roads, and so we also have a wastewater treatment facility. So one thing about models is that they are never accurate, but they're always helpful. So obviously some things aren't to scale. We have a really big fish, a really big construction worker, and a really giant owl. But we're just going to pretend that everything is to scale, and this is just like the city or town that you live in. So we're going to talk about pollution today. So what is the definition of pollution? So pollution is a harmful substance that is deposited into the air and in the water or on the land. And today we are going to be talking about water and land pollution that could happen. So first, we are going to talk about what kind of pollutants could happen in a neighborhood setting. So I'm going to use all these on the side here are different pollutants, but really they're not harmful. I'm just using them as a model for this. So some things that could happen inside a neighborhood is we like to have really, really green lawns in our houses, right? So we like our houses to have nice, beautiful yards. And we get nice, beautiful yards by putting fertilizer on them. So I'm going to sprinkle some fertilizer on these yards. So we like nice greenhouses. What other pollutants could happen inside of a neighborhood? What about litter or trash on the street? Maybe it was a super windy day and someone's garbage can blew over, and now we have litter all down the road. What else could be pollutants that happen in a neighborhood? What about on the roads of a neighborhood? How do we keep our roads nice and safe and clear when it's wintry and snowy and icy outside? We add salt to the roads. So I'm going to put salt on the road. I guess we should put it on all the road, right? And not just the neighborhood? Because like I said, it's winter. And some in our parking lot. What about a construction site? Do you think there could be pollutants at a construction site? Do you guys think that maybe loose or exposed soil could become a pollutant? What about animal waste? If we don't pick it up in yards, do you think that could become a pollutant? This must have been a really big dog. And what about oil leaking from those construction site tractors? I guess that could be a pollutant too. And so I guess if we say that's pretty much all the pollutants that are going to happen inside our neighborhood, right? There could be more. But now let's move on over to the golf course. Golf courses have beautiful green grass, and we get that beautiful green grass the same way we get the green grass in our yards nice and thick and lush, is fertilizer. So I'm going to sprinkle a lot of fertilizer on the golf course. This golf course is very green. Perfect. So now let's move on to the roads. What kind of pollutants do you think could happen on a road besides too much salt in the winter when we're de-icing it? What about cars? Do you think cars could leave pollutants on the road? Maybe some oil? So maybe there was a big oil spill from a car. Maybe it was over here too. What else can be pollutants on the road? Do you ever see litter on the side of the road? I know I do sometimes. So we're going to put some litter. Nice amount of litter. Now we'll move to this forest area. So the forest, you can see that there's a lot of exposed soil on it, and there's only a few trees in the middle here. So what do we take from forests that's useful to humans? We take lumber or wood out of forests. That's really useful to humans, and it all depends on how you take that wood out. So if you clear cut it, which means you're taking every single tree out, you're going to be left with a lot of exposed soil. But if you do selective cutting, or like every other tree gets taken out, you're going to be left with green patches where those trees are still going to be able to survive. And then, so I'm going to put more of that exposed soil on the mountain. How do you think having trees would also help with having less exposed soil on hillsides? How are trees held into the ground? They're being held into the ground with really long roots, and those roots hold the soil together. So having more trees means that the ground is going to be held together better, and when we get really big rain events, we're not going to get so much of that dirt being run off because those roots are going to hold it into place. So now here we are going to go to the farm. So there's a lot of things that could happen on a farm, right? So this farm has cows on it. What do cows do? Cows go to the bathroom. And so we're going to put some cow pies on this pasture. What about the fields? What makes our crops grow really nice and really big and really beautiful? Right, again, fertilizer. So we're going to put some fertilizer down. What else helps protect crops? What do farmers put on plants so that way bugs don't get them? They put down pesticides so that bugs don't eat the plants. So we'll put some pesticide in the soil so we have nice, healthy plants. Now we'll move on to the factory here. So the factories can produce anything, right? They could produce toys, games, there's food factories. Do you think a factory could be a cause of pollution though? It could be. It's never usually intentional, but sometimes we can get pollutants from a factory, or maybe that they had a mistake or a malfunction, and then there happens to be more pollutants. And then here we have a wastewater treatment facility. So last week we learned about the water cycle. We learned that water on Earth just keeps getting recycled over and over again. So the water that we use is the same water the dinosaurs used. So wastewater treatment facilities are one of the ways that humans help recycle the water. So wastewater is every time you flush a toilet, do a load of laundry, take a shower, all that water is going to go into a holding tank, and it's going to be the wastewater treatment facility. And so some of them have open tanks where they can take your toilet water and they can filter it out so well that it makes it clean enough that it's usable again, which is so clean. They're so good at it. But it can malfunction, and that can cause pollution as well. So now that we have pretty well polluted this place up as much as we can, we're going to talk about the two types of pollution. There's point source pollution and non-point source pollution. So point source pollution means we can point to exactly where the pollution is coming from. So let's say if we get pollution in this waterway, how are we going to know where it comes from? Are there anywhere where we can point to the source of it? So we talked about the factory, and not all factories, but sometimes factories can be a point of a source of pollution to where you can get enough pollutants that we can point directly where they are coming from. Also, sometimes if our wastewater treatment facility malfunctions, we can get point source pollution too, knowing the contents of the waste and knowing where it came from. Those can be causes of point source pollution as well. So now that we have a lot of pollutants on our land, some's already in our water from the point source pollutions, how do those land pollutions get into the water? They get into the water by rain. So now I have my trusty bottle of rain, and I'm going to rain all over this model, and we're going to watch where the pollutants go. So I'm going to start raining on the roads. Now we'll rain on the farm. Now we're going to rain on the factory more. Now on the mountain. And on the golf course. And in our neighborhood and construction site. So now if we see where all those neighborhood pollutants go, they go, I'm going to try to rain it off. They have a storm drain, and that storm drain has a label, and that label says, dump no waste, drains to the lake. So I don't know if you've been around in Ellensburg, the storm drains have it as well. Maybe next time you're outside in your neighborhood, you can look on the storm drains, but sometimes there'll be a little label on them, they'll have a fish on it, or it says dump straight to water. That means that there's no filter happening in this storm drain. So everything that happened, all this runoff of the pollution going into the storm drain is going to have a direct entrance right into our waterways without being filtered at all. So now we can see that our fish is in some very polluted water. But do you think that there's ways that we could help lessen some of that pollution? There are. We're going to talk about those. So one way that we already talked about was the selective cutting. So we can see that only the areas that had exposed dirt had pollution come out, which was that loose soil, but the areas that had trees holding in with the roots holding the soil in didn't have as much pollution or runoff. What about the golf course, or what about the neighborhood? So those can be, we can lessen pollution by picking up the trash, making sure we pick up after our pets when they go to the bathroom outside. We could, instead of ice on the road, you can use sand. We can also just use less. So polluting less is better than too much pollution, right? So we like to have really green grass. So this is going to be for the golf course and the neighborhood. And the farm. We love to have green, beautiful, nice, lush grass. So fertilizer is a really good way to do that. But we could just use less fertilizer and make sure that we're following the recommended amount so we don't get too much runoff and extra into our streams. What about the farm? So the farm, we had some cow manure, some herbicides and pesticides. And here we can see that it has just a straight, direct shot into the waterway, and we can see the pollutants from the farm go directly inside. And now we have to have farms to live, and they're critical for us, but there's ways that we can help slow some of that down. So using less is one, but we can also add things like a berm. So a berm is just kind of like a dam made out of land. So let's have a berm here, but I'm going to steal one of these. And so a berm is a big pile of dirt and soil and rocks, and then trees and plants on top. Remember, those roots are going to hold it in, and roots also act like a coffee filter. So now, since I have this berm placed on here, and I add some more pollution or more fertilizer, and I make it rain on the farm again, we're going to see that that berm is going to stop the pollution and filter it a little bit before it goes directly into the stream. As opposed to having no berm there, we're going to have a lot more pollutants fill up that stream. So berms are another way to help mitigate pollution as well. Also this cow manure, right? So here we can see that these cows have direct access to the water. So what if we built a fence there? So we only gave cows one entry point to the water. And that way they're not going to go to the bathroom in the water or too close to the stream. So what could happen is we learned about groundwater last week as well. And so some of your houses are on a well. So if we have too much pollutants on a land area and it seeps down into the well, then we can actually contaminate the well water. So it's really important that we don't get too many pollutants on the land to where it goes directly into our groundwater. How else do you think we could help mitigate for some of it? So here, this is just a nice, really lush, thick green piece of fabric, but in the model, it is just like vegetation or plants. So this is also called a riparian zone. The riparian zone is the green area along a stream or a river. And so where we have riparian zones, those roots are going to act the same as they do in trees, is they're going to act like a filter. So if we have really healthy stream banks, we can build up enough of those kind of like coffee filters or filters with the roots and the plants that the pollutants are going to be filtered through, so there's not as many in the stream as well. What about some of the car pollutants? So having more cars on the road is obviously going to cause more pollutants. So what if we carpooled as much as we could, or walked or rode our bike instead of all driving individually? I know that could be kind of hard, but it's just one thing to think about. Maybe instead of walking or driving to the corner store to get an ice cream, you walk there instead. So it sounds like a really negative, kind of sad thing that we talked about, right? We talked about how all these negative things are harming the environment, but there's so many ways that you could help the environment, like we said too, and help lessen that pollution. And even if it's just doing a little bit more by reusing things more than once, or maybe doing a little bit less by maybe driving a little bit less, or using less fertilizer on our yards instead of, and then maybe planting plants that don't take as much water. So after we watched the whole demonstration of the Enviroscape, now we're going to look a little bit closer at stormwater runoff. So I have a jar, and this is full of stormwater. Hopefully you guys can see how not clean and clear that is. So this is a jar, the same jar, but this water is tap water, and then this is stormwater runoff. So you can see the difference in the water that goes over all the surfaces before it enters into those, the drains on the streets, the stormwater drains. And so this is the water that goes directly into the stream. So now for our little experiment, you guys are going to need some glass jars or clear plastic cups, some masking tape, and a Sharpie. And we're going to collect some stormwater and snow and see what happens in them. So I'm going to have a jar for snow, for fresh snow, like clean white snow, snow that might be a little bit dirty, or stormwater, and then also tap water. And label your jars with what you put inside of them, so that way you won't be confused and you'll know what they are as your experiment goes on. Okay, so I've labeled my jars. I have my jar labeled sink water, and this just has water straight from the tap in it. I have my jar labeled runoff / dirty snow, and this is the water the jar that has the stormwater runoff inside of it. And then I have my jar labeled clean snow, and then I just took a scoop of clean snow that was outside. And now what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to write down your predictions. So what the experiment is we're going to let these water evaporate, and we're going to see what's left after it evaporates. So in the water cycle lesson, we learned that evaporation is when water turns from a liquid to a gas or a vapor. So we're going to let these evaporate and turn to vapor, which means the water is going to vaporize, but what's left is going to be the contaminants or the particles that are in the water already. So I want you guys to predict, what do you think will be left in the cup that has clean snow in it? What do you think will be left in the cup that has stormwater runoff in it or dirty snow in it? And what do you think will be left in the cup that just has the regular sink tap water inside? After you have your observations written down, you're going to put the jars in the same location, maybe in a nice sunny window so that they can evaporate faster. and then keep monitoring the jars to see if it changes, to see if maybe something settles on the bottom, or keep the observations going. And then once it's all evaporated, I want you to look at the contents at the bottom of the glass to see what is left. If you don't have snow where you live, that's totally fine, and you can still do this experiment. And instead of collecting snow, you can try to still collect some stormwater runoff. If you know that there isn't stormwater runoff, you can try to create stormwater runoff by pouring clean water onto the cement and then catching the water after it runs down the cement a little bit. Or you can pollute your own water and add maybe some soil, some salt, or some dirt, or some things that you would naturally find on pavement or outside already before it is stormwater. And then do the same thing, and then just keep them in a nice sunny window, watch it evaporate, and continue to keep the observations going as the water evaporates. Thank you for following along with week 5, and I look forward to talking to you guys next week all about the ocean and pH.